I don't know. Oh, hello. What a great place to camp. Huples cat. This is my after action report. It's my first ever overnight camping in a tent in cold conditions. It's currently about -12 centigrade, which is +10 Fahrenheit. It was roughly stable at that temperature of wind through the night. The problem that I faced was that the snowfall that came was about 3 times the amount it was supposed to come, and where I'd set up was fundamentally all wrong, and I did most of the things wrong inside the tent when you're camping at -21 centigrade, which it hit at one point, which is 0 Fahrenheit. I pretty much did everything wrong, and I'm still kind of puzzled. I'm about a 10-minute walk from the house. I had a radio so Kitty could call me. I didn't use it for various reasons I'll go into, though it worked. And the whole thing was kind of puzzling to me, that I had such normalcy bias from being okay camping that I actually put myself into pretty much a hypothermic state. But we'll get into that. So I already dug the backpack up and I've dragged it out to the house, and I'll show you a picture of that. But this is some of the other gear that was in the tent. Of course, I never used like anything really. I just didn't. And there's a whole bunch of stuff there that I got that I didn't use, and there's a whole bunch of stuff I should have used. This is kind of dramatic. I will show you it. Ugh. This is my tripod and flashlight and a sheath and a knife and a whole bunch of stuff in there. That's solid, so that's going to have to come out and be defrosted. The thermoses, plastic, knife, pretty much everything in the tent is frozen solid, and there was a lot of water and a lot of snow in the tent. Now I don't think the tent actually leaked. I think the water came in from the front when I got out. So we'll get into it. What did I actually do wrong? The first thing was I parked myself by the little creek that comes off the beaver pond. So I'm well below the pond surface. So again, that's going to entrap cold air and encourage condensation in the tent. The other thing I didn't expect was this to actually overflow, because it must have got jammed by snow plows potentially down that end and flood out. So this is actually where my tent was. I also did not put in a foot pad because I didn't think I needed one. I'd read a few bits and pieces that said you don't. Actually, it would have been a good idea. It would have been a good idea to put a foot pad in to give another layer of protection from heat going from the bottom into the ground. And in fact, people actually recommend using wool blankets or merino wool blankets as an inner layer between the tent floor and the ground. And I kind of think that might have been an idea. Though in retrospect, it's kind of bleeding obvious. This is not a place to camp, but I thought it was idyllic. I've only ever been here when it's dry. I thought it was nice and flat. I thought it was going to be fine. So, after the event, I looked at what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to camp if possible on soil, if not on leaves, and if absolutely necessary on grass in the winter. You're supposed to park yourself under a tree if it's safe. Again, be very careful of trees. You're supposed to be high ground, not low ground, and as far away from any water source as practical. So that's the site location. You also would kind of like it so the sun's going to hit the tent in the early morning. And again, I didn't do any of that. I expected myself to shelter myself from the wind here. In the event the wind was so strong it didn't. But what I actually needed to do was be in a windy, not gale force, but a windy location to have a breeze going through the tent flaps to actually pull out the hot water that I was pouring into the air of the tent. And I didn't do that. It is phenomenally beautiful. The other thing I did was I should have got a tarp. I don't really use them, but I should have got an actual fly tarp well off the top of the tent at an angle. So any snow that was falling on the tent would actually bounce to the sides of the tent, but not on the tent. So airflow would be encouraged, not discouraged. In fact, the tent was completely enclosed in snow. There was about 1.5 foot of snow on top of the tent, and that's with me in a small tent moving around and it falling off. And I had the shovel in the tent, which I kind of thought was dramatic, but I actually needed that to get out. When I opened the door, I didn't have 2 foot of snow drifted against the front of the tent. There was 2 foot of snow on the ground. So the only way to get out would have been to crawl through snow, and I was pretty tired. This is yellow snow. You really should not eat it. So you can see how deep the snow is inside the forest. Yeah, our values of sleeping pads, didn't think about it, didn't dawn on me, wasn't really that bothered, just took the air mattress. I've got 3 foam pads in the house. I was going to bring one of them, but I just didn't bother. I think for sure in this type of conditions I need to take an air mattress and the 2 foams and have like as big a bed off the ground as possible. I definitely was getting cold. Now I was also having water circulating underneath it from the drain, from the swamp, but I didn't realise that. I mean, the list of what I did wrong continues onwards. I had half a bottle of wine with Kitty and a beer. I had a little bit of scotch when I have no idea what that is, by the way. I had a little bit of scotch when I got there. I wasn't hydrated at all. Really, I was dehydrated. And another big mistake in this type of conditions was calories. I didn't have any calories with me and I didn't eat anything. Found the gel, never thought to use it. So I would need to eat more. Every time I'm awake, I need to be eating a bar or something. I need the fuel to keep the heat going. I didn't realise that. So I was smart. I brought a thermal layer in case I got cold. When I got cold, I was so cold and wet and damp and out of it, I didn't change into them. What you should do is you should change all of your clothing and put a thermal layer on. In fact, maybe 2 thermal layers and extra socks and a hat and all the rest of it before you get into the sleeping bag. All of your clothes that have any sort of moisture on it should have gone into a dry bag inside the tent. Just kind of gently brushing off my clothing and putting it into the tent was a huge error. You want the tent to be as dry as possible. I didn't do that. I also didn't know that I'm going to put out a pint to a litre of air moisture inside that tent during the night, and I did. You can see getting around without snowshoes is pretty difficult, and with snowshoes it's kind of hard. So I came in with snowshoes to do all of this stuff, and I'm just using boots now because I'm basically tamped down the path. I'll show you that on the way out. Probably one of the biggest errors I made was I automatically breathed into my sleeping bag because I was cold, my nose was freezing. So the sleeping bag got very, very wet. And again, the condensation was going all over the tent and all over the sleeping bag and all through my clothing. And I was getting colder and wetter and not realising it. I had no pee bottle. A pee bottle is a bottle you've got well labelled that you urinate into. Should have had that. Once during the night, I remember about 2 a.m, 3 a.m, getting up, standing inside the tent and trying to pee out. I think the whole process took about 15 minutes, during which I got completely covered in snow, got snow pouring into the tent, made no efforts to clean it out, and just went straight back into the sleeping bag, letting the snow melt, and again, increasing my wetness and condensation problems. Wetness kills. Now, you know those emergency blankets, Mylar blankets everybody has, and I'm kind of useless. Apparently, if you tape one up on the top of the tent on the inside, apparently that really helps with heat when it gets this cold. I might try that next time, see how that goes. The other thing that really drives me crazy is, like, I had a lot of garbage bags, I didn't use any. Like, all of my gear, including the clothing, including the boots, including the coat, should have gone into garbage bags to be stored up and tight, so when I breathe out moisture, it doesn't go onto them and into them. Didn't think of it, didn't realise it, and that brings me to my most important point. Wow, this stream really backed up. Beautiful though. I've done a lot of camping at 15, 20 centigrade. Done quite a bit of camping at 10 centigrade. Done a little bit around about 0 centigrade, freezing point of water. I was confident. Didn't see any problem with going -12 to -21 for my next time out. It to me was just like I'm testing out the tent, I'm testing out the sleeping bag. So let's be clear here, it was -21 at the worst, -14 most of the night. That is, you know, around about 4 to 7 degrees Fahrenheit. -21 centigrade is about 0 Fahrenheit. And there was quite a significant wind chill on top of it. What I should have done was tried a gradual approach. Tried camping at 10 centigrade, then at 5, then at 0, and then gone down in gradual increments and learned as I went and studied it more, which was my hugest mistake. Really had normalcy bias and a bit of arrogance going on. I did this one. It's cold, right? So I sealed off the tent. Duh. The tent has to be open and ventilated on as many sides as possible. Maximal ventilation. And you have to get up with your shovel and get the snow off it to keep it ventilated. If there's air not going through that tent, it's getting wetter and wetter inside the tent. and dampness and cold kills. Should have had a few micro towels, should have made a conscious point of every time I went in that tent of getting all snow and all water out of it. Anything that was liquid I should have to get out of it. Now to be frank, it was so cold that as soon as the air hit the side of the tent it just immediately froze. Now if you're not touching the sides of the tent and your sleeping bag's relatively dry, that's not a big issue. The problem I had was my sleeping bag got very wet because of the amount of moisture that was in there, because I'd made no efforts to let air circulate through. I just basically went in the tent. I didn't actually make any efforts to get the hot air that I was generating by doing the stuff I was doing in the tent out. A couple of things I found out that don't really apply. The fly sheet, the rain sheet that I did use it because of the snow forecast. If it's not forecast to snow or rain, don't put it on in cold conditions. Again, it will help entrap hot air inside the tent, which is not what you want. The other thing's quite bizarre. It's don't cook in the tent. I think that's pretty straightforward. It's a safety issue. I've seen stuff online where people are suggesting lighting candles in lanterns inside the tent to do with the condensation issue. I personally wouldn't try doing that. So what do you do when you have a bunch of frozen solid waterlogged gear and you have no garage and you have no spare room and you don't even have hot running water? This is our new bathroom with the tiles and the fixtures. Only cold water because nothing works here, and into there it's going to go. I'll be interested to see if this ever works again. So this is my Biolite 500 lumen lamp, and it only had about 3/4 of a charge when I took it out, and when I turned it on it works, and I was very happy to see that it's used 1/4 of its charge. 2 dots, not 4. So this is solid kit. That's nice to know. I screwed up badly. I didn't research it properly. I assumed my knowledge of non-frozen camping would be fine. It's a different thing. It's an entirely different experience. I'm going to get wet. It's going to get condensation in that tent when it's minus 21 centigrade, 0 Fahrenheit, no matter what I do. The secret is to make sure that you're prepared for it. So you have clean, dry clothes in dry bags, or at least in garbage bags, to put on, rather than just stay wet. Now I had walkie-talkies and they worked, and the idea was, because I turned mine off, I didn't want to waste the battery, was that when I woke up in the morning I would put coffee on and I would give Kitty a shout and she'd come tromping out to see me. And what happened was round about 3-4 o'clock in the morning I kind of basically went into a mild form of hypothermia. Well, sometime in the middle of the night, snowing, and I had a hard time sleeping. It's getting kind of cold. Condensation's a thing. Let me just clean the lens. So I don't know if you can see this, ice from my breathing on the inside everywhere. And this condensates really quickly. Alright, let's have a look outside. Ooh. Definitely snowing. And just was cuddled up inside that sleeping bag, breathing into it the whole time. When Kitty actually came at 9 o'clock in the morning and was calling for me, I didn't respond for quite some time. And when I did respond, I wasn't quite functional. I didn't know where I was. I didn't quite know what was going on. Now I rapidly rallied myself and dug myself out. Walking through this snow, the 10 minutes back to the house with no gear almost did me in. And it took me the rest of the day to kind of recover. So today what I've been doing is I've been digging out the car because there was like massive amounts of snow and digging some paths. So overall, did I find out anything of interest? Yeah, that tent's brilliant. There was a ton of snow on it and it was very windy. Absolutely good. The sleeping bag's great if it's not abused. I abused it. That was stupid. But what I really found out was what you expect is never going to be what happens. Never. I expected to wake up and have about 5 to 6 centimeters of snow around me on that tent, and I thought it would be a great dramatic video and be a good way of coming back to YouTube. Well, I didn't expect to have 2 foot snow fall in this forest on that tent. Not blowing snow, but falling snow. I think we had 50 to 60 centimeters of snowfall during that night in the early part of the morning here. That's about a half a meter. So for those people who are not metric, I think that's about 2 feet. And there's definitely 2 feet around. I'm not talking about blowing snow, I'm talking about what's actually just flat and level. about 2 foot of snow fell. So yeah, I managed to dig us out today, so we were actually entrapped on the property all of yesterday, and yeah, so it's kind of cool. So I really enjoyed my experience of getting away from that tent and that camp, because it could have killed me, and I was really close to home. If Kitty hadn't known where I was at all, she'd have to come looking for me, and it's not as easy as it sounds in a blizzard with this amount of snow on the ground. And I just really screwed up. So no alcohol, lots of high calorie snacks, keep dry as possible, put everything in garbage bags and dry sacks, mop out that tent like I'm crazy every time I open it and go in, really clean it out, have full ventilation going as much as possible, and make an absolute point of not breathing into that sleeping bag no matter what it takes, even if I have to get myself a plastic cone around my neck. Hope you enjoyed this after action report. I am, as ever, just telling you what happened. Like, one of my basic prepping things was, if I needed to in January, I would walk the 150 kilometers in snowshoes using pretty much the equipment I have to get here in a bug out situation. And I think if I'd got 15 miles before dying, I would have done well. Totally had no clue what I was doing. Totally was arrogant and believed that it was just normal camping, but cold. No, it's abnormal camping, wet and cold. And everything is much harder than I anticipated it to be. So this was a great learning experience. And yes, I will be going out again once I manage to get all of this gear dry. I'm going to use the sunlight today, and then I'm going to put it in the spare bathroom and let it dry out there, because yeah, this has been an interesting experience. So whatever you're doing, be calm, be safe, and be happy. Toodles. This has been a Sleepy Terrier, Front of the Fire production 2022.